Hello, this is Dr. Sandra Cosgrove. I'm a history professor at the College of Southern Nevada and executive director for Vote Nevada, where our tagline is Solving Problems with Civics. In this video, we're going to look at Nevada's election of 2022, specifically at the ballot questions. If you need to, you can look us up on our website, our blog, or email me at info@votenevada.org, and please do follow us on social media. So once you are registered to vote, you will receive an official sample ballot, either in paper or electronic format, before each election. In that sample ballot, you will find information about when early voting starts. You'll find out where the early voting polling locations are. You'll find out information about the voting machines. You can see all of the different types of information listed in the table of contents. You will also find information about candidates and ballot questions. Today, in this video, we're going to discuss ballot questions. In your sample ballot, you will find 2 or 3 pages, depending on how many races are in your area, information about each race that you'll get to vote on. You'll see who's running in each of those races. And at the very bottom, often on the second or third page, you will see ballot questions that you can vote on. Ballot questions are extremely important. Ballot questions are the ability of the people to have a say in their governance. It's direct democracy at its finest. It's when the people get to say, here's a law that we think should be passed, and we for some reason cannot get it passed through the legislature. Or here is an amendment to the Nevada Constitution that we think is appropriate. If you do a ballot question, you either have to find a legislator that can carry it for you, or you have to take petitions out and have your fellow Nevadans sign it. Either way, it's a long process, and by the time it shows up on the ballot, it has gone through many cycles of people looking at it and debating it, and this is your moment where you get to participate by voting yes or no. Let's talk about ballot questions as direct democracy for just a minute. People-powered democracy is direct democracy. The idea that people should be able to participate directly in passing laws, in deciding whether laws should be changed or not, and by recalling politicians that get elected and then don't fulfill the job in a way that people find acceptable. The idea of a ballot question and the idea that people should directly participate in democracy goes back to the colonial era. You can look at the Puritan town hall meeting. You can look at Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin talking about this. It's an additional check on government. When we talk about checks and balances, being able to run and vote on a ballot question is an additional check. There are 3 types of direct democracy that we have access to in the state of Nevada: the initiative, the referendum, and the recall, and all are protected in the Nevada Constitution. Let's talk first about the referendum and recall because we don't have either one of them on this year's ballot. So I want to briefly explain them before we talk about the initiatives that are on the ballot. In a referendum, what a group does is they take a law that's already passed and they put it on the ballot and they ask their fellow Nevadans, should we keep this law as is or should this law be struck down? So what do we want? Do we strike it down or do we want to keep this law as is? If the people say we want to keep that law as is, then that law can only be changed by another vote of the people. It cannot be changed by the legislature. And that's an important thing. Many Nevadans probably have heard the word referendum recently in relationship to the Dobbs ruling that came down from the Supreme Court that overturned Roe v. Wade. The court eventually, what it was saying is that the decision related to abortion is going to be down at the state level again. So in the state of Nevada, people asked, well, what's our law? What protections do we have? And they discovered that in 1990, a group of Nevadans came together and they took the existing abortion law that was in statute, the Nevada Revised Statute, and they put it on the ballot as a referendum. And they asked Nevadans, do we want to keep this law as is? Yes or no? And Nevadans, by I think it was about 72%, said yes, we want that law to stay as is. That means our law that's in Nevada Revised Statute regarding abortion can only be changed by a vote of the people. It cannot be changed by legislators or the governor or anybody at the state level. The other direct democracy mechanism I'd like to briefly talk about is the recall. And recall is very easy to understand because it is what it says. If you elect someone and they're not doing the job appropriately, if they're doing things that voters feel they shouldn't be doing, voters should have the right to remove them from office before the next election cycle goes. So with a recall, voters go out and have a petition, they have it signed. If those signatures are from registered voters and they're valid, then there's a recall election. And if it passes, that person is recalled and someone else is put into their place. So the voters get to say before a person's term is over whether they should stay in the office or not. What we have on our ballot this time are initiatives. And so this is where the people get to initiate laws directly. The people get a say in initiating laws. There's two types of initiatives. There's statutory, and then there's a constitutional amendment. Right now, we currently have a statutory ballot question that is proposing to break up the school district, CCSD, out for the signature gathering process. They have until November to see if they can bring in 141,000 signatures from registered voters. If they can, then the ballot question will qualify and it will go into the next legislative session, which starts in February of 2023, as a priority bill. If the legislature picks up the bill and they have hearings and then they vote to accept the statutory ballot question, it becomes a law. If for any reason the majority in the legislature decides that they do not like the ballot question, they can't kill it. The only thing they can do is just to pass it along to the next election cycle to allow voters to decide whether they would want to have that ballot question passed as law. If it gets passed in the legislature, then for 3 years it cannot be changed. But after 3 years, that law can then be amended by members of the legislature. That's one of the reasons that sometimes groups of people pick the other type of initiative, which is a constitutional amendment. Once you amend the Constitution, it can't just be changed by law. You have to go through the constitutional ballot question process again. So it's harder to do, but it also means that whatever you are deciding on has stronger standing. It's harder to change. The constitutional amendment ballot question has two routes that it can take. The legislative route, where citizens convince a legislator to sponsor the constitutional amendment, and in that case, they can take it through 2 consecutive legislative cycles. And if the legislature votes yes in 2 consecutive legislative sessions, then it goes out to the ballot for a vote of the people. Ballot question 1 and ballot question 2 in this election cycle are both constitutional amendments that went through the legislative process. The second way you can propose a constitutional amendment is through the citizens initiative process. Ballot question 3 went that route. In this case, citizens come together, they pool their resources, hire an attorney to write the ballot question so that it is legal and proper. Then they raise money so that they can get signatures gathered. Again, it's 141,000 this time. And then if it qualifies, it gets enough signatures, there was a court case against it, and the Nevada Supreme Court ruled in its favor, then it goes to a vote of the people in this election cycle. If ballot question 3 passes this time, it must then pass in 2024, so a consecutive election. If it passes again in 2024, it then becomes effective in 2026. So on ballot question 3, the earliest it would go into effect is in 2026. So now let's look at the 3 constitutional amendments that are on the ballot in 2022. One in Nevada, we'll see 3 ballot questions. There also could be municipal ballot questions, a countywide ballot question. So there could be additional ballot questions, but we will all see ballot questions 1, 2, and 3 at the statewide level. So ballot question 1 proposes to add an equal rights amendment to the Nevada Constitution. It says, shall the Nevada Constitution be amended by adding specific guarantee that equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by this state or any of its cities, counties, or other political subdivisions on account of race, color, creed, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, age, disability, ancestry, or national origin. You might be aware that we have a federal Equal Rights Amendment that was proposed in 1973, but that one is much more narrow and only uses the criteria of sex. So this one is much more inclusive and much more broad. So if ballot question 1 passes, that language will go into the Nevada Constitution, and those rights will then be enforced by the state. Ballot question 2 is a little bit more complicated because it's doing two things. It's taking two things out of the Nevada Constitution and then adding in something new. So it says, shall the Nevada Constitution be amended effective July 1st, 2024, to establish the state's minimum wage that employers must pay to certain employees at a rate of $12 per hour worked, subject to any applicable increases above that $12 rate provided by federal law or enacted by the Nevada legislature. So this is what's being added in to the Nevada Constitution that will go into effect July 1st, 2024. It is saying that the minimum wage in Nevada cannot be any lower than $12 per hour. It can go higher if our legislature or Congress decides to add to the minimum wage, but it would never be able to drop lower. And this would go into effect July 1st, 2024. It then goes on to say, remove the existing provisions setting different rates for the minimum wage based on whether the employer offers certain health benefits to such employees. So currently in the Nevada Constitution, it says if an employer offers health insurance to their employees, they can pay $1 less. So currently the minimum wage in Nevada is $10.50 an hour. That means if an employer offers health insurance, that they can pay $9.50 an hour. This amendment would take that out. Number 3, remove the existing provision for adjusting the minimum wage based on applicable increases in the cost of living. So in the Nevada Constitution, it provides for a mechanism to increase the minimum wage based on increases in the cost of living or inflation. The cap on that, however, is 3%. It can't be more than 3%. Proponents of ballot question 2 do not think that this is sufficient for advancing the minimum wage to where it needs to be, so they would like it removed. So it's adding in that the minimum wage, the floor is $12 per hour. It can go higher, but it cannot go lower. And then it's removing the exception where if your employer is offering health benefits, they can pay $1 less. And it's also removing the existing adjustment for cost of living. So those are ballot questions number 1 and ballot question number 2. Ballot question number 3 also does two things. It says, shall the Nevada Constitution be amended to allow all Nevada voters the right to participate in open primary elections to choose candidates for the general election, in which all voters may then rank the remaining candidates by preference for the office of U.S. Senator, U.S. Representatives, Governor, Lieutenant Governor, Secretary of State, State Treasurer, State Controller, Attorney General, and State Legislator. So there's two things. First, and they're interrelated, it's saying in the primary process, have all the races that are at top of the ticket that are listed here be open, the same way as we already have open primaries for the judicial branch of government and for our local elections. So instead of having some races be open primary, where everyone gets to vote and everyone's on the same ballot, and some races are closed primaries, where you're going to divide candidates up by their party registration and only Democrats and Republicans get to participate. Instead, have those top partisan races look exactly like the open primary races that already exist. So the judicial branch, the executive branch, the legislative branch, and our federal election offices will be one ballot, everybody listed, all voters get to vote. It also goes on to say that in the primary, that instead of having 2 people move forward for these races, it will be the top 5. What proponents argue is when you only allow 2 people to move forward, it's usually the 2 people who have the most money. It's not necessarily the 2 people who had the best ideas, but they had more money to get their ideas out. So by having a top 5 race, you'll be able to pull into the general election people that maybe had some really good ideas, so they do have supporters, but they just didn't have enough money to get their word out, to get their face out in the short time that we have for the primary election. So this way you're getting more choice getting moved forward into the general election for voters. So you get more voice by having an open primary instead of a closed primary, and then you get more choice by having more people moving forward. But if you have 5 people in those races on the general election ballot, that means, according to the Nevada Constitution, the person with the most votes wins. 5 people means somebody could win with 21% of the vote. That wouldn't be very good because then that means 79% of people said no to that person. I teach Latin American studies, and when a president in Latin America gets elected with 21% of the vote, that's a coup waiting to happen because the majority of people don't support that person. So to fix this, to make sure we get more voice and then more choice and not have that problem, you add in ranked choice voting. So in the general election, in these races, you'll be able to rank by preference the candidates, all 5. One vote would count, but you could rank all 5 of the candidates. So you'd pick your first, your second, your third, your fourth, and your fifth. So what are you doing here? You're actually setting up the ability to do an instant runoff. And so in ranked choice voting, you're saying with your first vote, this is the candidate that I like the most. So in this election, I want this person to win. So when the election happens and they tabulate all the first votes, if somebody has 50% plus 1, they've won the election, that race in the election, and there's no runoffs that are going to happen. But if no one gets that 50% plus 1, then what happens is it goes into instant runoff. And so if your candidate is still viable, they're not the person with the least number of votes, that's where your vote is going to stay. But the person with the least number of votes does not move forward into the first instant runoff. They drop off, and then the computer program looks to see who voted for that person first, what was their second choice, and then their second choice votes moves to their second choice candidate in that first round of the instant runoff. And then it's tabulated again. This happens repeatedly until someone gets to 50% plus 1, and then that way we can be sure that whoever wins has majority support. And so what ranked choice voting is, it's just instant runoff so that we don't have to do a delayed runoff later, which costs more money, and oftentimes you don't have as many people participating. But as you can see, that's what your ballot would look like. You would either touch the screen if you're doing in-person voting, or you'll bubble in just like a Scantron. If you've ever done a Scantron test at school, you'll bubble in one bubble for each column to rank your candidates by preference. But according to the ballot question, you only have to vote for one candidate, but you may rank up to 5. And then this way we're sure that somebody has majority support. Can you research the ballot questions? If you go to the Secretary of State's office, so Google Secretary of State Office Nevada, and then on the Secretary of State's website, in the search box, just type ballot question booklet, it will pop right up. And that booklet has information about what the ballot question looks like on the ballot, what we just read. It also has a legal explanation of the ballot question written by the Legislative Counsel Bureau, which are the attorneys and professionals who work for the legislature. And then you will also be able to see a yes statement for the people who support the ballot question, and then a no statement from the people who oppose, and then they each get to rebut each other. So if you go to that booklet, which is separate from your sample ballot this time, you can look at that information. You can also do Google searches for the ballot question campaigns. There's usually a yes on 1 or yes on 2 or yes on 3. And then you'll probably find a no on 1, no on 2, no on 3 to be able to see what both sides are saying kind of in real time. You can look through the newspapers. A lot of the newspapers are online. There might be articles, letters to the editor, opinion editorials. And again, these are not academic level analysis, so you're not going to probably see footnoting or evidence given. But that's a good way to kind of gauge where arguments are at. And then you'll probably be able to go on social media. But as we know now, and that's why the asterisk is there, beware of misinformation. Libraries offer information to judge the reliability of online information. So if you go to the College of Southern Nevada's library website, you'll be able to see a guide for little kind of tips and tricks for how to determine whether the information you're seeing on a website is reliable. And it will say, do you know who the author is? Do they provide evidence and footnotes? Do they provide data? Do they provide links to go to other evidence? So social media is a way for you to, find out information, but you just have to be really careful that you are not being misled by misinformation. If you would like information on ranked choice voting specifically, if you go to YouTube and just type into the search bar ranked choice voting, lots of videos pop up. I've put the URL of one video. It lasts for about 53 seconds. So it doesn't take a whole lot of time to go through a couple videos where they literally walk you through the process of what happens with ranked choice voting. Also, if you would like, you can get out your phone and take a picture of this QR code or go to this tiny URL I've created on a website called 123rcv.com, a fun little poll which uses ranked choice voting, where you could rank the teams in Nevada from first to last. And so you can rank the Las Vegas Aces or the Reno Aces or the Las Vegas Raiders. You'll be able to rank them to see which one you like the best, and then you'll be able to see how others also ranked. So again, if you want to get more information specifically about ranked choice voting, these are some resources. And this is the end of our look at Nevada Election 2022 ballot questions. Again, this is Dr. Sandra Cosgrove. I'm a history professor at the College of Southern Nevada and executive director of Vote Nevada, where our tagline is solving problems through civics. You can visit our website. Our blog has a lot of resources for the election, or you can email me at info@votenevada.org. And please do follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you.